first time in my life I'm truly free to see the clear-cut forest for the poison sea, to see the waters occupy the shores of Jersey, and I feel alive.
Ooh, synced them up at the same exact time. That's the reason why you keep coming back. It's because of the minimal editing I have to do in post. Hello, my name is Eris. Welcome back to Calfire Crackpots in our new and improved 2-week AP exam doomsday schedule.
Yep, my name is Declan. We've entered the 11th hour here.
Oh my
There's
god,
so many things.
the stress is really starting to set in. It's you think you're like, yeah, I got this. This won't be no thing. And then you try to take part of a practice test and you're like, oh dear.
My cope has been uh just rationalizing how I'll do good on the SAT while doing minimal practice.
Bro, SAT is gonna be funny as hell. I'm figuring out how badly I want to cheese it,
Oh my god.
but like the
It's
score technically goes in your transcripts. Like I'm gonna just take it. I'm not gonna like
it
go
sucks that
ham.
it goes in your transcript because I know you've already got like a usable
Ugh.
score, so you can't just put in a
Such a
smiley on all
I
the
got a score that I'm never going to get again.
Dude,
Oh,
that's
that
so
was
good.
it's far too lucky. Yeah, it's Physics C does not mess around, man. We're covering new content until 2 days before the exam.
Oh my god. That's
And then,
awful.
oh, but my favorite is that, like, because the class is all seniors, there's going to be a week of time when it's me and my teacher alone.
Yeah.
Oh,
That's gonna be awful.
I'm gonna, like, bring in my Switch, and then like, I want to see if he wants to play Mario Kart.
I can't imagine being in a class like that.
I don't know what I'm
But
gonna do. I don't know if
that
he's
will
just gonna, like, say, just go to a study hall, I'm leaving.
that last week where it's just juniors is gonna be wild.
North Campus is going to become South Campus for a week.
The fleeting moment in time where just fights break out. I mean,
I don't know.
frankly,
I
I
mean,
think if anyone's gonna fight in that school, it's gonna be the seniors.
yeah, well, yeah, because it's like I do not care anymore.
It's like I don't care. I got into like some random college you've never heard of.
Hold on, I'm gonna count down the days for you, Declan, until the A push exam. So we have 1, 2, 3.5 weeks.
Yeah, that's
Oh my God, I can't do that to myself. It's because like, Physics C is going to be hard, but I think it won't be that hard to review for.
A
English,
push is
I'm
gonna
just
be that hard to review for.
A push is going to be that hard to review for. Calc, we're doing just only review until from now until the AP test. So I'm like not going to study for that outside of class. And then there's A push.
Everyone in
I could take A push now. I could take A push now and probably get a 4.
yeah.
But like, I don't want to do that.
My English, not my English, my apes class has fully separated into two groups of people. There's there's the people that are juniors that care about the test and want to do good, and there's the seniors that like just do not care.
Oh yeah, Tales all this time. I guess let's get into the capital C content today because, well, we were away for a week. We passed April 1st, the official end of the West Coast wet season. It wasn't good, but we'll talk about it. So, where we're headed for the next year. But first, we need to do the news. Well,
Yeah.
so Joe Manchin is using his pretty much unilateral authority in the legislative branch of our perfectly functional government to oppose the SEC climate disclosure rule, which would require all companies registered with the SEC, so anything that's publicly traded, to say its target towards net zero and its current fossil fuel emission.
that
And then,
frankly that doesn't even do anything. That doesn't
it,
require them to make a fossil fuel goal.
it's more symbolic than anything. And I mean, I think it's like common sense. If you're investing in an oil firm, you should kind of know what you're getting yourself into,
Yeah.
versus if you're investing in like Joe's solar panel supply store. I don't know. It
Yeah.
seems kind of like a roundabout way of saying of encouraging US companies to lower their emissions, which you could just fix through nationalization, but we're not gonna go into that. And then
There's many, many ways to do this better, but regardless.
Joe Manchin is basically a Republican, and his approval rating is nearly double Joe Biden, so it's around 80%.
Oh my god.
Good lord. I mean, like, how
Nearly
did West
everyone in West Virginia works in some form of coal mine.
Yeah, it's the only reason that he's popular is because he's owning the libs, I guess.
Yeah.
But Joe Manchin is probably more of an establishment Democrat than Joe Biden, and he's like one of those compromise people. And what I really, unfortunately, with the war against Russia and all that, and cutting petroleum now and gas prices the way they are, domestic oil production really does need to increase in the short term. And any climate legislation made between now and November needs to include some kind of getting off foreign oil at the expense of drilling for the oil in the US, because drilling for the oil in the US is more climate friendly than drilling for oil in Saudi Arabia, because
Yeah.
you don't have to carry it all the way halfway around the world. It's just right there
Yeah.
for you. Um, but because high energy prices are so unpopular, and because that needs to be a part of the solution is domestic oil production.
I think both
I
parties are
think
sort of people are just
I
kind of
think
pushing
this
their
is
feet in
a
the ground and
yeah,
yeah.
it's a case of the worst person made a great point. Um, Manchin is right in that we need to, in the short term, increase domestic oil production. Everything else kind of negates that good part about him, but I think that there needs to be a democratic compromise in order for something to get done.
Yeah. There's really no other option in the short term because there are so many people that are in lower income brackets in the US that cannot really physically afford to pay $4 or $5 per gallon for gas to get to
Like,
work.
it's ridiculous at this point. We said it before, but like, it's not like, haha, you're only just whining because you have a six-wheel truck. No, it's an actual problem at this point. Like, this is kind of nearing 70s energy crisis levels at the moment.
Exactly, yeah.
Like, Jimmy Carter is saying "I told you so" in his skeletonized voice.
He's doing
God,
pretty good for like 97.
he's 97. God, he doesn't look bad for 97. Like, anyone who's 97 who doesn't look like they're at 1 HP, like, it's fine in my book.
Yeah.
And then Elon Musk, like, bought 9% of Twitter.
That was definitely out of left field. I'm not sure how I
Well,
feel about that still.
I knew he was going to do something, because one does not simply acquire hundred something billion dollars in 1 year and not do something like that. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm kind of, a member of the bourgeoisie scum, because I have a couple of shares in Apple, just because, it's a blue chip tech stock. It's gonna kind of go up. And I got, big business got invited to a shareholder meeting with my 2 shares.
You
Um,
hold shares. Not many, but you
what
hold them.
me going to the shareholder meetings, going to Zoom in a suit and tie.
Oh my god.
Well, no, I didn't know Al Gore was on Apple's board of directors.
Really?
He is, yeah. And apparently they just like someone, I guess one of the like bigger shareholders sent in a proposal to like because Apple's had a bunch of forced labor lawsuits in the past year. And they denied comment on that for whatever reason, but I think we all know.
Yeah.
Company doesn't care about you, company doesn't owe anything to you, company doesn't want to owe anything to you. It's that simple.
It's just unfortunate that that's the state of affairs for most companies.
Yeah, it's the fact that a company isn't motivated by its principle, it's motivated by greed. That sucks. But
It does.
our boy Elon wants to edit all of his reprehensible tweets about trans people and about his girlfriend leaving him for Chelsea Manning. So he can edit his tweets. Apparently, he only wants to edit his tweets just so that he can correct yeast or on.
What?
In his like letter that he sent out, he said that he only wanted the edit button to like fix typos, and he said that in his examples were YSE or ON for no.
I don't care is the thing.
Like, oh, if you look at all 4 tweets I've put on the Calfire Crackpots Twitter, it's kind of like if you're gonna say something, Twitter is a professional platform for people who feel like arguing all day, and people who, policymakers or whoever is kind of like a means of distributing information. Say what you mean. Don't say anything stupid. This stuff should
Yeah,
have been common sense. Like
given people in
Zoom.
the past have been clowned on before for their
Oh
typos,
yeah,
despite the negative press covfefe, but it
that was
doesn't
not a
matter.
typo. That was a. I still don't know how to feel about that because it was funny for like 2 days.
And then like every late show put it on there for like a month and a half.
And then like Jimmy Fallon was laughing at it for like 3 months, and then everyone was like, "Well."
When Jimmy Fallon laughs at your joke, you know that the ride is over.
Unfortunately, that is true.
But
Anyway,
I don't think it's important. I don't think it matters one way or the other, and everyone's kind of blowing it out of the water.
yeah, it's kind of like the edit button is just gonna be, people are just gonna get rid of their racist tweets, and then I think that Elon Musk is gonna continue to pull stuff like this with this cartoonishly large amount of money until someone, stops him.
Yeah.
I hope Elon Musk has a nice time. We will not allow any actionable threats on Calfire Crackpots, so I hope he has a nice time. Anyway, so a ballot measure in California that's gonna, be voted on this November is higher taxes on the wealthy to pay for curbing wildfires, forest management, and electric vehicle infrastructure.
Hmm.
Cool. Really cool. In all likelihood, it's probably going to get passed. So
Not
that's fun.
bad.
That's why I like California. It's a reliable Democratic stronghold that can reliably pump out ballot measures like this, which is kind of states usually watch California for, and most of the West Coast for liberal ballot measures, like Oregon's drug decriminalization, which so far appears to be working, and then this. It's if these things can be shown to in a reliably democratic society, um, decrease wildfires or increase electric vehicle infrastructure, you should believe that other blue states are going to do the same thing.
Yeah, because there's no longer the risk from there's no longer the Republican statement of, oh, what if it doesn't work and everything
It's like,
becomes a shithole after you
well,
legalize
it did
heroin? And
work.
it's like, not really how that works, but pop off.
All right. Well, there's more news I didn't cover. Not to mention the highway of death that Russians are pulling on Ukraine, and the fact that Alabama is criminalizing gender affirming care for people under 19. But we won't get into that. We're just going to get into what is the direction west.
The direction west, very important for weather, very important for the liberal world, as we just discussed.
The direction west in I guess here in the Chirac conflict zone, that does mean we're heading into DeKalb.
Wow,
Wow,
DeKalb.
DeKalb. It's the
It's
one of my
something.
friends goes to NIU, and he kind of like took a bike ride in the surrounding suburbs. He said he's never seen so much crack in his life.
Makes sense.
That place is weird. Like it
What is
just
there to
seems.
what is there
What's
to
up?
do? What is there to do other than meth?
That's the point. That's why drug use is so prevalent in rural communities. It's like, what else is there for people to do?
Yeah.
Anyway, well, so we had ourselves a grade A La Nina year. Textbook example: wet PNW, dry Southwest, dry Central Coast, wet Chicago, dry South, cold Canada. In a El Nino year, pretty much all of that's reversed. But it's just, the air here is warmer, so high pressure, and then it pushes the jet stream down over the US where all the storms go into the Pacific Northwest. But we did have a few good storms in, California Central Coast. We'll get into that. But I, for spring break, went to Sequoia National Forest and Park.
Yeah.
So yeah, I got some cool pictures, and it's a little bit of a microcosm for how the West is functioning at the moment. Pretty much all of these pictures are original, taken by me. So I took this and this. This is a General Sherman, that biggest tree ever in the world, largest living thing ever. That we talked about being threatened by the KNP complex fire way back in October, and this is the snow way up in the mountains. So
Hmm.
Sequoia National Park is Los Angeles. It's pretty much directly north. So there's three fires that kind of influenced this area lately. So the Castle Fire in 2020 and the Windy and Canpy Complex in 2021. And this picture I got, and this picture I got, and this one of just huge fire damage, and some of it was actually still smoldering. It had only really stopped recently. The place we were a lot of roads were closed because they were either, gone or under a bunch of tree debris. And, kind of obscuring all of that destruction when we were hiking are these. So these are sequoia saplings, quite a few. This one's a little older, but all of these have the potential to be something great. And when these come out of such a fire damaged area, they have all the nutrients in the soil. And in fact, the pine cones of sequoias don't even open unless there's a forest fire.
Yeah, similar
But
to acacias, there's a lot of plants that are very much dependent on fires, although allowing fires like this to happen that can damage the crowns of trees and take down larger sequoias, this is not natural behavior.
yeah, there were definitely a lot of them with huge fire scars, but the rest of the tree was still fine. And then there was stuff like this where the entire tree just got torched. And there were some ones in between where it was the tree survived, but it will definitely fall over.
It should be stressed that sequoias don't really die.
The only reason they die is if they fall over.
Yeah. So
So like,
so many of them all of a sudden being killed by fire when fires have existed in the past is more or less unprecedented.
yeah, and it's worth mentioning that these three fires combined, these dark green areas are different sequoia groves, killed between 19 and 20% of all mature giant sequoias in the world. Because sequoias can only grow in about a 1,500 feet elevation range on the western face of the Sierra Nevadas in about a 600-mile span. So it's not a whole lot, and they are the most effective carbon sinks in existence. The most voluminous, the most dense, the most carbon per kilogram. They are pretty important when it comes to like forest absorption of climate emissions, and if all of them are being killed, that's no good. But it's also was kind of interesting to see the new life of the trees. Like this picture was taken right next to this tree.
Yeah,
So
it's
nature's phoenix.
it
Not
is
the city
healing.
phoenix. That one sucks.
Although again, it should be stressed that it would take hundreds, if not thousands, of years to return to the original state of the forest.
Yeah, so these trees, probably only one of these saplings would survive just out of competition, and then the likelihood that one of these saplings even grows to be a mature tree is extremely little. Like they had this in the visitor center, they had this like big like Wheel of Fortune style thing where it would show like if you're a sequoia seed, what would probably happen to you, and there were like 200 different spaces of like different things that would happen, and only one of them was mature tree.
Yeah. So is
And
the way
then
of natural selection.
more about wildfires. So wildfire season only really reflects how the last wet season went. So last wet season was more of a La Nina year than this one was. So that's why more of the fires were concentrated around like Northern California, and there were quite a lot in uh, what's what's that called? S- What state is that? Washington and Oregon. There was the bootleg fire that got press coverage for a while that was like something like the largest wildfire in Oregon's history. And then the Dixie Fire, which was like the second or third largest in California's history. So again, fire season last year was bad, and then this just kind of shows a better graph of how a landscape is to recover from a wildfire. In a lot of ways, the current situation that we're in with wildfires can partly be attributed to climate change, but most of the severity of the fire can be attributed to previous forest management. So, ever since the West Coast was kind of urinized, what's a good word for that?
What?
Inundated with white people,
Um, I suppose. What is the word?
colonized.
Gentrified.
Ever since the West Coast got gentrified in the 1600s with the Spanish, you know, the native tribes there either lived along the coast where wildfires were less common, but most of the time there weren't really much settlements living up in the mountains where wildfires were more common. So a lot of the times they didn't care if fires burned, or if they burned, they knew how to manage them. But when people started coming in, they'd be like, "Oh, cool! I'm gonna make my house in Sequoia National Forest because it's so cool here." Yeah, it's pretty cool, but are you ready for all these wildfires to come through and destroy your house every few years? And they weren't, so they said, "Okay, let's put out every single wildfire." That allows the underbrush to grow. That allows crown fires to become a thing, and then cross that with declining rainfall, and then you've basically set up the entire West Coast for insane wildfires.
Yeah.
And
Most of
that
these crown fires that are so difficult to deal with and continue like ravaging the forests have resulted out of policy that says fire is scary. We should never let controlled fires happen ever,
and that
which lets the brush
policy
build, which lets things get incredibly flammable.
Mhm. And that policy has largely been reversed in the last like 30, 40 years, but you know, you're still having to deal with that century before. And given all these fires, there's some predictions being thrown around that within the next few decades, the forests will be effectively returned back to their natural state
Hmm.
in terms of how much brush is actually allowed to be there, because the West Coast will no longer be able to support wildfires as big as this. Nature will return to normal if it's allowed to be left alone. That's something that the more I look at all of this, the more that I understand. It's that nature functions best when it's left alone. Things will return to normal, things will return to equilibrium if they're not disturbed.
Yeah.
But a forest takes around about 30 years to recover after a wildfire that wipes out most of the standing trees there in terms of creating a new growth forest. It's just kind of food for thought. But if you look at like California home prices, you know, California, oh God, housing's so expensive. You could like a 30 acre ranch with like a 6 bedroom house in the middle of like Donner Pass could easily be had for like $1.5 million.
Hmm.
Just because home insurance, fire insurance is like rent. Fire
Yeah.
insurance is so expensive in California that it's oftentimes a separate part of people's finances.
Hmm.
All right, we got water season results. It was bad.
It was
So
bad. Yeah.
we started off real strong there. We got a real wet December. It was looking like things were gonna go pretty well, and then it just didn't rain for almost 2 straight months, and there was a little bit in March, but too little, too late, and we are left with 30% of normal of
Ugh,
snowpack,
that's
combined Sierra. State Water Project, they got real confident and said, we're going to fulfill 15% of our deliveries this year. Well, they backtracked and said, we're going to only fulfill 5.
yeah.
That's up from 0, though.
It is. At one point, they did say we will not be fulfilling any deliveries. Technically, anything's an improvement, but at
That's
the
right.
same
That's right.
time, everything is a failure.
Yeah. And what's interesting, is that when I don't think I have a picture of it on here, but the reservoir that I was at, in Sequoia National Forest, I forget what it's called, but it was well over capacity. It was at something like 141%. So there were a lot of like trees that were like completely submerged. And that's before a lot of the snowmelt that would come in. And this was Southern Sierra, which got the most snow.
Hmm.
And then Texas, it's looking like is going to get it worse. Um, but given everything that we've seen, given that 2020 was kind of mild La Nina, 2021 was worse, and 2022 was slightly worse, I think I can say with relative confidence that we're headed into another multi-year drought like the 2011 through 2016. How long it'll last is anyone's guess. It could be over next year. It could go on for another few, but this was not the end of it, as a lot of people thought. And if you look at the 2021 versus 2022 map, it is a little bit of an improvement. No part of the state is an exceptional drought yet. That will certainly change. Texas is not so lucky. Man,
Yeah.
Texas will never get a break. Jesus, it has been like that forever. Yeah, being a farmer in Texas right now is almost as worse as being an almond farmer in California.
Yeah. It's definitely going to be a shaper of policy in the coming years.
It's going to be a tool for policy, and then I also noted down here on farming prospects that Gavin Newsom signed an executive order last Monday that required a lot of the state's water providers to put level 2 contingency plans. And level 2 basically means that you need to cut 20% of your water use and then higher fines for people who violate that, blah, blah, blah. But it goes from level 2 to level 6. Level 6 is the most scarce, and I don't think level 6 has ever been used. Level 6 is kind of. Level 6 essentially means that water has been nationalized effectively. Like, water restrictions are so tight and the enforcement is so high that, water has become governmentally owned.
Yeah.
But these are wonderful graphs, wonderful thing if you're on board and want to look at the California Department of Water Resources website on a Friday night, which is what I was doing yesterday. So this is reservoir levels for 2021 and 2022. So you want to look at the big players for this. There's a lot of really small ones, but Oroville, Shasta, San Luis are kind of the ones you want to focus on. Oroville is kind of around the same. Shasta is a little bit lower. San Luis is a little bit higher. It's more of the same. And again, the capacity of these reservoirs kind of tops out around June when a lot of the snow melts over. So a lot of these are going to be rising. But as it stands, April 1st, we're kind of at the lower end. And I can really say that it's probably going to be about the same as last year. I'm expecting a lot more almond orchards to be upended. I'm expecting a lot more groundwater depletion. I'm expecting a lot more drought in the Central Valley because there's likely not going to be much rain there over the summer.
Yeah.
And then there's miscellaneous disaster. This was the outlook for winter of 2021, and it looks like they kind of hit it right on the nose. So, the Pacific Northwest, like Vancouver, Seattle, got record and dangerous flooding. North coast of California got a little bit of drought reduction, but a lot of the South either continued or worsened its drought. And then, Texas, Colorado, if that fire a few weeks ago was anything to go on, Colorado is going to continue to be hit hard by this current drought. And then in terms of miscellaneous disaster, it's just pushing that climate extreme further in either direction, pushing a drier southwest, pushing a dangerously wet Pacific Northwest. It's decreasing the habitable zone.
Yeah. It's what is it? Even if California makes improvements in policy and improves their ability and capability to handle this,
You
there's
can't
still
buy
so
rain.
many more states that will have to be dealing with it that don't have liberal uh, governments.
Yeah, it's
So
like
it's gonna be interesting to see how Texas hits it, especially.
Utah's and Texas citizens might be suffering just as much as California's, but they might not have they definitely don't have the tax base. They don't have the money they don't have the resources or the voter or government will to do large scale projects like the wealth distribution that California is experimenting with, and then all of the climate policy and forest management, which a lot of these places can't do. They just don't have the resources for. And this is just the US. Like, you want to try telling this to like Balkan states with large forest fire capacity, or Africa with large scale drought capacity. It's just a lot of the is there a capital and is there will? And you can't replace one with the other. They need to be two separate things.
Yeah, you need to have the will to do it, and you need to have the resources to be able to execute the will.
Like, capital can't buy will, and will can't make capital.
So, might be a
So
little tough to buy a house in that part of the Southwest.
yeah, so where does this leave us? So this is the 2021 index of billion-dollar weather disasters. So, we had that flooding, California, at the beginning of the year. We had all those storms over the summer, the tornado outbreak in December, Hurricane Ida, all the flooding in New York, the Texas deep freeze, which feels like it was longer ago. Um, in terms of 2022, I'm expecting it to be I'm expecting it to be about the same. I'm expecting California to have another busy record-setting wildfire season. I'm expecting um, a busy Atlantic storm season. I'm expecting a busy tornado season here in the Midwest. I'm expecting a lot of rain and a lot of cold for the Pacific Northwest, and I'm also expecting flooding in New England. I'm expecting a continuation because it doesn't appear that the wet season left us in much of a worse position than last year, but I also don't expect it left us in much of a better one. I think that the last 3 years have shown America that climate change is a real threat. It's just every year climate change becoming less of a partisan issue, less people denying its existence, less people saying that it affects them personally, I think was really going to be the thing that influenced them. Because I kind of stole this from the LA Times. I would highly recommend their Boiling Point newsletter. That's where I get a lot of my climate news. And their one this week, I'm going to quote it here. If we'd started phasing out fossil fuels decades ago when scientists first sounded the alarm about carbon pollution, maybe we'd have an easy glide towards a habitable planet today. But that's not what happened, especially in the US.
There's just
The
no way
US
around
fossil
it.
fuel companies, the campaign of denial and upending American politics and all of the distractions of the 2000s. Now we're scrambling to slash pollution, and that's going to come at the expense of people's jobs. It's going to come at the expense of people's livelihoods. That's going to make fuel, gas, and energy more expensive. It's if we'd listened to Jimmy Carter during the energy crisis in the 70s, we wouldn't be here. If Al Gore had gotten elected and pushed renewable energy campaigns, maybe we wouldn't be here, but we're not. And you can't dwell on the past. You need to look towards the future. What can be done now? How can we reduce emissions now? How can we shift focus now? Because humanity has never allowed itself to be proactive. We've never really allowed ourselves to address the threat before it gets here. And now that the threat is here, now we're starting to see large scale emissions reduction programs by states and countries. Now we're starting to see fossil fuel pledges. Now we're starting to see people actually phasing out fossil fuels, getting solar panels on their own roofs. It's what needed to happen, and I don't think it would have happened any other way. I don't think that humans are a species that allows itself to be proactive.
Yeah, even though these are things that absolutely needed to happen, it needed to happen even more so when it would have been. How do I describe it? The trend upwards means that you not only have to correct it, you have to make a trend downwards in order to counteract climate change. But that's just to become even. In
Mhm.
30 or 40 years, we might be in the position we were in the 90s. We have to work against time, and we have to work also against our shortcomings in the past.
Yeah, You know, if you look at war, if you look at not addressing the Nazis until it was too late, if you look at the wins in the human environmental movement, the wins that we've racked up are acid rain, smog, and ozone pollution. Those were easy because it was fairly easy to just say, all right, no more chlorofluorocarbons, no more put filters on all your smokestacks, put I don't know, stop sulfur dioxide emissions.
Yeah.
Those were fairly easy to do. And again, you know, litter is less of a problem. Water pollution is less of a problem because those were fairly easy to quantify and those were fairly easy to declare victory over. Climate change, there's no obvious point at which we've won or lost. The cards always have been and always will be in our hands, no matter how bad things get. And, you know, if we're at the point where you will never be able to declare victory over climate change because humanity will always emit carbon dioxide emissions because we exhale carbon dioxide.
Yeah.
All that our effort will bring us is less suffering than there should have been, but less than there could have been. And I think that's where 2022 leaves us. I think 2022 will, at the expense of more people's lives and at the expense of nature, will convince more people that something is wrong and that things need to change. And I think that's the best that 2022 can bring us. So, I guess all you listeners, here's to a 2022 dry season that will convince more people to fight against climate change. Next episode on the Green New Deal, because we didn't cover it this time.
Yeah, very important piece of policy, potentially going to help us make a lot of big leaps and bounds. Also, at the same time, something that's being clowned on by more than half of the Senate.
The Green New Deal, I can see, is if and when climate change gets to the point where it is cataclysmic destruction, that is the only way I can see the Green New Deal passing in its original form, as a form of complete economic change and reform, almost like the original New Deal was. But it can only happen when the previous system has screwed everyone over so bad that it's the only option. And right now it isn't the only option. So we'll talk about all the different aspects and the whole spectrum of the Green New Deal.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else?
No. Any shoutouts?
Shout outs as usual. Shout out to Ukraine. Shout out to people who are going to have their homes destroyed by wildfires this year. Shout out to people who are fighting the good fight.
Yeah. Shout out to all those. Many, many more.
The point of contention is how they act. Where you draw the line will set you free. The debate is over.